Welcome back to the Delivered podcast by Cartograph. Today we are talking with Sean Gigremosa. Sean has over 20 years of technical and product management experience. He has time spent at companies like Midway Games, Rolls-Royce, and he actually shared with me he built the first website for the TV show Cops, which is really cool. He's currently the founder of Clarative, which is an AI discovery tool for product teams. And Sean, we got to know him because he was an early adopter of Cartograph, of the Cartograph product delivery management tool. And he's had a great influence on us. We've become great friends. And anyway, yeah, really excited to talk to you today. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Bentley. Yeah, I'm excited too. I can't wait to have this conversation going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so to kick things off, I definitely want to dive into Clarative and what you're doing there and how you view, your work there, kind of improving the existing discovery, world and workflow for product teams. But first and foremost, I just kind of want to introduce you a little bit more to the Cartograph audience and ask you, kind of why did you first engage with Cartograph? What was important about solving, these product delivery problems for you at the time?
And thanks for that. And then I guess the easiest way or that I can answer that question is really, with delivery, and then you plan your sprints, and it's always, and I think I've told you this before, it's always a wag, right? It's just a white ass guess. And it's very rare and hard to get that right. You need very experienced teams that has been working together for a long time. And most likely, especially for new teams, that whole process of being able to estimate delivery takes a while, right? And then, I'm sure your listeners are aware that the changes in engineers and developers and product owners and product managers and designers and team is constant. That's the only thing that we can really kind of assume as happening consistently is that, people will leave, people will get in and so on and so forth, right? And that in itself kind of breaks the whole velocity, I guess, aspect of your kind of KPI, your metric, right? So that was one of the things that I really kind of drew me to Cartograph. And as I mentioned, I think I've said this to you before. We've had this conversation before. Was there has to be a way to use the data that you already have, either in Jira or DevOps. I don't know what that is. To be able to make it so that the person doesn't have okay, it's going to take you 2 weeks, where kind of the data that they have actually predicts or makes that estimation. And then your engineers can just focus on the work, right? Because they don't have to, kind of think about, okay, I think it's going to take 2 days, but really in reality, it's going to take 5 weeks.
Absolutely. Well, and I obviously, that I agree with everything you just said. But just to add some context about kind of, I think what we both believe is that it's not that, it's anyone's bad at estimating or anything like that. It's just there's too much going on and too much interdependency to do it really well. And I guess that's my next question for you is why do you view, managing product delivery and getting estimates more accurate? Why do you view that as important?
I've always prided myself in being able to deliver. As an engineer, as a developer, as a BA, as a product owner, as a product manager, and that was, being able to deliver quick and fast was one of the things that I really love. Again, I think pride myself on. So why that's important is because that actually, being able to estimate properly, then you can plan better, right? And to be able to plan better when you have to communicate to your leadership, so hey, it's going to take 3 weeks. It better take 3 weeks, right? because the communication is, by the way, it's not going to take 3 weeks. It's going to take 5 weeks, or it's going to take 6 weeks. You know what I mean? I'd rather overestimate, like, and the problem there is that you sort of overestimate and pad and pad and pad, because you'd rather be safe instead of accurate.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Well, and that's so common, right? I mean, it's so common across the industry. And in reality, right, like when you're saying, when you're committing to some kind of an estimate at the product level, right, at the leadership, the VP level, it's because those estimates, those plans are getting communicated to customers, right? I know at your last role, that was a big workflow for you guys, as customers needed commitments as far as what you were going to be able to deliver, because then they would implement your technology into their technology and make commitments to their own customers, right? And it has huge implications. And I always talk about the revenue implications. At the end of the day, product and technology is a revenue driver, right? And if you're not able to plan kind of how you're going to add functionality or add products or features, then how can you plan how it impacts revenue, right? It's huge, right? And I know you felt that.
No, exactly. It is huge, and it's not just about, like, yes, revenue is definitely important, but satisfaction, is even, like, to me, like, I'm very customer driven, right? So that customer satisfaction is even more so, right? Because like, once they see it, it's delivered to them, then you're like, okay, then they can use it, and they can actually, like, it can help their product, especially from from a SaaS perspective, right? A B2B SaaS perspective, where your customers need your product because, as you mentioned, they have to deliver to their customers. And, like, it's that supply chain almost, right? It's like, especially if they're not straight to B2C, where their customers would still also need, need to deliver to, like, so on and so forth. So I think being able to accurately predict when functions and features are are live is is vital to revenue, is vital to satisfaction, is vital to like the success of like your product or your team.
Well, absolutely, yeah, and it's really what we do, right? In technology, in SaaS, that's literally the whole purpose of the existence of the company, is to deliver product, deliver value to customers. So, no, I love that. And I'm really grateful for your support of Cartograph. And I saw you're wearing your Cartograph t-shirt today. That's
I am. So,
love that.
Exactly. No, thank you. So, like anyway, like the one thing I'm very, I love solutions and technologies and startups are probably similar to yourselves. And I always look for, like, hey, what are the best kind of like tools that are out there that I can use to make myself better or my teams better, right? And there's no point in there's no point in trying to reinvent the wheel where other teams that like have actually built something amazing. So when I saw you guys, I was like, okay, well, I mean, I know, like, estimates are always bad. Again, like, and like, I can actually take it, and sometimes they don't even like doing estimates, right? So it's like, okay, if I can take that and then use a tool that that can accurately predict, then my engineers do what they love, right?
Right. I actually had a conversation with the CTO recently, and in one of his previous roles, he had the same thought, right? Where his engineers, they didn't like to estimate, they didn't like to do the planning. They didn't want to commit to things, right? And understandably so. But they were wasting a lot of time in these planning meetings every week. And so the CTO, he ended up creating a very complex, spreadsheet that did all this calculation. It took a lot of work to get any kind of estimate out of it. But they started using that more, even though it took a lot of work, because it was a vast improvement on how much time the engineers were having to spend in these planning meetings. And you're exactly right? For him, unfortunately, back when he created the spreadsheet, Cartograph didn't exist yet, but he's actually, a great supporter of Cartograph now. And anyway, I completely agree. But that's a great segue kind of to the next kind of thing I wanted to get to, as far as your affinity for startups and improving the way we work and things like that. I would love to spend a little bit of time on Clarative, and how you came across the need for it, the main pain you're solving, how you're solving it. Some of that I'd love to hear a bit more about that, because I kind of said it at the jump, but you're focused on discovery, that discovery process for product teams, and we're focused on the delivery part, right? So it's very symbiotic, tools and space. But yeah, how did you kind of discover the idea for Clarative, and love to hear a bit more about it.
No, of course. And thank you for that. And I guess to answer that question, let me kind of like talk a little bit about my experience, right? So, as a developer, as a BA, there's also like you talk to customers, or as a product manager, even you talk to customers to say like, hey, this is what I want. This is what I want to build. And then you go like, yeah, I get it. Then you build your requirements or whatnot, and you talk to your engineer, and the engineer goes, okay, yep, I get it. So they build it. And then your engineer shows you and say, okay, well, and then you show the customer goes, this is not what we talked about. You know what I mean? Or this is not like, yeah, you got like A, but B, C, D, E, and F is nowhere to be seen. And you're like, and that's a problem, right? And then that's a problem for not just probably the companies I've worked at. There's a problem for every company. And to be honest, there was I was doing research for Clarative. It said like $115 billion per year is wasted on this problem.
Wow.
Because, as you mentioned, if you don't have, like just from let me put it in a delivery aspect, if you don't have the proper information, you don't deliver, right? And just going back to Cartograph, like you add scope and you add scope and you add scope, and then your timeline gets longer and longer and longer and longer. And then when kind of like the tools and the technologies right now is like, we can solve this problem,
right?
We can actually provide clarity, like so that your teams, again, it's Clarative, right? So your teams can be more productive. So that's
working on the right things at the right time, the things that are the most valuable to your customers. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And as a we've had this conversation, because I was trying when we were trying to kind of like come up with, kind of like this idea, I've had conversations with you as well. And then one of the things that really stuck to me, that what you said, because it's not necessarily about all the features that your customer has requested, is out of everything that your customer talks about, which one is the most important?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you kind of like define that, right? So that was that was a challenge that we talked about. It's like, okay, well, just like how Cartograph looks at data, we looked at data that we can actually capture from conversations to be able to define your priorities. So, like not just say, hey, these, not just, like solving the problem. Okay, hey, this is exactly what the customer wants. But aside from all of these things that customer wants, this is exactly what the customer wants right now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I've experienced that, right? As a startup, you can only build so much, right? And there's been times for us where we're a dev and a half, right? And I'm the half dev, and I'm doing other things too, and you can only build so much. And, I remember a time we came to visit you in Las Vegas, and we kind of said, hey, we're really trying to communicate capacity, right? Capacity needs to be part of the roadmap planning conversation. And showing you that first interface, I don't know if you remember, but kind of showing you that and saying, we have a wireframe, we are starting to build an early version of it because we validated a lot. And I remember your feedback was like, yeah, boom, like if we had that, it would be game changing. And, that's really I think that's the bleeding edge of product discovery today.
Exactly.
like other technology solutions are, like survey systems for product teams or something, but it's really nothing that, and I've even told you, in some of the product interviews we've done as you've been doing discovery for Clarative, I've told you about how many hours of recordings we have with potential customers and customers basically doing discovery and trying to figure out what they need us or want us to build. And, essentially what you've created is something that helps to aggregate that information and surface and highlight the most important things you need to be working on, right?
Exactly, because just like as you said, right? Like product teams, startups are already having these conversations with their customers, or at least a lot of companies that say like, hey, I'm customer obsessed. Like I put focus on customers. Then they should be having these conversations, right? And the challenge has always been like, okay, well, let me record this. And then you get like a boatload of recordings in your directory, somewhere in your drive or whatnot, that really realistically, you only go back if the customer, kind of like gets mad at you because you said something or you built something so you have to like, oh my God.
Right.
So instead of like writing it down, I have to go through recording just to cover, like CYA basically, right?
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, right? If they get watched back, it's very rare, and it's only if you have to. Because again, we all are so busy. I don't always have an hour to go review those videos or 3 hours to go review the last few times we met and try to piece things out, right? So for me, if I had something that just, hey, tell me the core insight. What was the biggest thing? That was the most important thing we talked about? Give me a summary. That's huge from a product discovery perspective.
Yep. And I said like that like as you mentioned, that's the reason why it really flows into discovery, because as you have that direction, as you have kind of like the details on what you need to build, delivery then gets more accurate, right?
Right.
Then you have the data to be able to like your engineers can work on, and then as that iterates over time, again, it's a very, I want to say, strong symbiotic, I want to say, alignment between discovery and delivery. I think I read a couple years ago, there was a methodology called dual track agile, where it's really between discovery and delivery, and that marriage to be able to say like, hey, these are, and providing something to say, hey, these are what the customer wants when they want it,
right?
Not like 2 years from now or 6 months from now, but now.
Totally. Well, and at our Deliver conference that we ran, which you were able to come to and participate in and speak at, I remember talking about on stage. I said, so often, at least for our customers, the people we talk to, they find some new amazing value or something that they feel like is new amazing value for their customers, but it's so hard to get it to market, or it never quite gets to market in the original way they had planned, or it takes way longer and customer interest and excitement wanes. And that's a real pain that people feel as far as delivery, right? They'll do their discovery, they feel excited, customers get excited, and they say, hey, we're going to build this for you. And then they start making commitments around, okay, we think it'll be done here, and then okay, actually here, and then everyone's like, hey, I signed a contract based on that getting delivered, and it's been 6 months, or whatever it is. And so really understanding the delivery process, and part of that is not just forecasting timelines, but it's saying, what else is going on right now? Do we need to kind of deprioritize certain things so we can fit this, right? And that's where having capacity in your product planning really gets important. But you're so right. It is this symbiotic relationship, because if you have something that is really important that you've done discovery around, that needs to, the value that needs to get delivered to customers, then you've got to understand delivery to get it there, right? But if you don't understand that the value you're discovering is the most important thing, on the other hand, if it's not the most important thing, and then you go and execute and deliver it, you just wasted a whole bunch of time and resources delivering the totally wrong thing. And so I'm really excited about what you're building, and kind of how our two kind of core problem statements and solutions can work together for product teams. But I'd love to dive in a bit more about your experience. So in your previous roles, you've been everything from developer, individual contributor developer, to VP product across your career. What's been your experience working with teams on discovering value, delivering that value? Is it something that's been a major headache for you? Where are some of the biggest headaches, and maybe what have you done to overcome some of those challenges?
And I think culture, and I would just say team culture is very important. And honesty and trust is very important. And why I say that is, like a lot of the problems in delivery and discovery as well. It's like you get an engineer that says like, okay, well, it's gonna be done, but because they try to hide the fact that like almost like try to lessen down the problem, that it gets communicated like, oh, okay, well, everything is fine, right? But it's not really fine, right? It's there's actually so having that culture of trust, of honesty, and just like speaking your mind makes kind of like the whole discovery delivery team work better, right? And then one thing that I always say, or I've said, like one of the most important aspects from a team perspective that worked really well for me is the concept of a sprint zero, where the sprint zero doesn't really say, okay, hey, this is what we want to build, but really kind of like builds that initial trust and culture within your team, especially for new teams, is probably, if not the most important, I would say one of the most important things that you can do, right? Because it's understanding technical architecture, kind of like technical design, where you want to go from a product perspective, and also meeting, right? Like meeting the folks that you're working with for, like whatever this project is, right? And at least in my experience, every team that we've implemented as Sprint Zero has been fairly successful, meaning that we were able to deliver. And if there's things that we weren't able to deliver, then we were able to kind of like shift or pivot to say like, hey, the reason why this is not working is because of this. Then because of there's that trust and honesty, then we can say, okay, well, if we can't do this, what can we do? Oh, this is what we can do. That, you know what I mean? So I think, it's not about like trying to like do exactly what was said, but working together to be able to achieve a common goal, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's so important to highlight methodologies and processes that have worked well for you. I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it'll be really interesting for our audience to kind of learn more about those types of things that have worked well for others. And it's such an interesting topic. I'm glad you brought this up, because trust is really at the heart of what I personally believe I'm trying to create with Cartograph. Trust between product and engineering teams, trust between product development as a whole and go-to-market teams, trust between product development and executive teams, and really being able to, provide data around what are we capable of, what can we get done, right? No more hedging, no more saying, well, I don't want to commit to that because I don't know if this other thing is going to impact it. And, it's so difficult because it lives in all of our heads, and it's all rooted in expectations we set with each other and perception. And if we just have the unbiased data, right, to say, here's what our team puts out consistently, right, with some methodologies implemented, some processes implemented that our engineers feel structure and frankly workflows that get out of their way, right, not workflows that add more work, right, that take up time. Those are such important things. And you've always been someone that's really highlighted culture, but those things, putting those things in place and creating more transparency for everybody only drives more trust. It drives more trust. It truly builds a strong team, right? That trust each other, that don't feel like they have to have a guard up and hedge a ton when they're communicating. And it's such a healthy, awesome way of looking at it. So do you feel like implementing those types of processes and creating more transparency has really helped your teams, trust each other?
No, exactly. And then I think just having the data to be able to communicate, right? So it's like, again, let me link it back to what you guys are doing, like with that timeline, and hey, this delivery is going to get pushed back because like we added this new kind of like scope, this new project to be able to visualize and say that properly without like, like here it is. This is exactly what happened. This is exactly why. Then that whole communication becomes so much easier, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't have to say like, okay, because the problem, the other side of the problem is, a lot of engineers, when they say like, okay, it's gonna get done, they'll overwork themselves and stress themselves out just to reach that, like that goal, right? And to be honest, it's not, it's cool to do it once in a while, but it's not sustainable, right?
Right.
And then, like your teams get upset. They hate, like doing their jobs.
Right.
They leave, which again makes the whole thing kind of like worse. So,
Right.
if there's a way, if there is that trust, there's that camaraderie, there's that culture, that openness, then they can say, like, if this is what's going on. But having a tool that they don't even have to hide behind, kind of like the tool, the data is there, it's presented to you properly, and everybody, and it's a data that you can trust, right? Then it makes the culture a lot better. It makes the conversation a lot better.
Totally. No, I think that's the most important point we've made. Honestly, we always say Cartograph is predictability for product teams and defensibility for engineering teams, right? Engineers are able to say, cool, here's how much we're worked. If you want different outcomes, then you need to prioritize product priorities differently. And anyway, Sean, thank you so much for the time. This was a ton of fun. It's always great to see you, talk to you. You can find Sean on LinkedIn, connect with him there. He's an awesome guy, great guy to know. He's working on awesome stuff with Clarative. Highly recommend reaching out to learn more about his AI product discovery tool. Beyond that, Sean, anything else from you?
No, of course, nothing. Like, again, I think Bentley, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And then I love talking to you. We always have like really, like great insights on these conversations. Every time I always learn something as well by talking to you. So it's been great. So happy to, have further conversations down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so kind of you. All right. Well, thanks again. We'll talk with you very soon. Thanks, Sean.
Awesome. Thanks.